Joey, welcome to Small Business Strong.
Yeah, man. Thanks for having me.
Of course. So I'd love to hear first an overview of Tekton Game Calls.
So Tekton was born out of I was building houses and I bought a lathe to help work on a project that we were doing. I had this lathe and it was just kind of like sitting there calling me. And I was like, I figured out how to use it. I figured out how to make a baluster for this job we were doing. So we just had to make one. I'm in Charleston. And so the historic houses downtown, you kind of got to go through them with a white glove. And so I just self-taught how to use a lathe, figured out how to make that baluster. And I was like, well, what can I do with this lathe? And so that's when it took me down the rabbit hole of duck calls and just scouring YouTube, which at the time there really wasn't much on there. I think there was a forum. I'm trying to remember the name of the forum, but between YouTube and that forum and just going and hanging out in some retired guy's shop that are here in Charleston that, turn bowls and pens and stuff like that, just gleaning and, as much as I could from them. But it turned into something bigger, say in the last probably 6 years or so. And it's been a fun trip.
You're resourceful, man. So you take something that you use for work and you're like, what else could I build with this? When did the idea of a duck call pop into your head?
Well, I'm a musician. I always loved, whether it's guitar or trumpet or euphonium, I've always loved music. And I've always, since I was probably 8 or 9 years old, played music at a pretty decent standard. And so when I got into duck hunting more, that's when I figured out, hey man, this is just a musical instrument. This duck call, it's got a reed, it's got, an exhaust like a trumpet would. And so that's when I kind of put the mechanical side of my brain with the creative side of my brain together and started going there.
How'd you get into duck hunting initially?
So when I got out of high school, I went to Methodist University, which is in Fayetteville, and I was a golf professional for 14 years, and I was working at Harbor Town, and I had duck hunted with my dad and deer hunted with my dad growing up. His friend Bob, who's since gone on to be with the Lord, and so has my dad. But between the two of them, they've always kind of took me under their wing when it came to hunting. And when I got out of college, I took a job at Harbor Town. And towards the end of my time at Harbor Town, I started figuring out oh man, the Ace Basin is only 45 minutes away. And so my final year at Harbor Town, I had met my wife and she moved to Charleston. And so once I moved to Charleston, it just became a lot easier to access and be able to hunt. And I had 2 other guys that kind of took me under their wing when I moved here. And one guy played on tour. His name's Brian Duncan. And then another guy, Britt Stokes. The 2 of them, the 3 of us would go out to the marsh near one of the golf courses I worked at. And we would, hunt 3 or 4 days a week. And that's how we kind of cut our teeth.
That's so cool. Well, I'd love to hear where you came up with the name Tekton.
Yeah, so I am I guess you could say I'm pretty spiritual, or, I'm a Christ follower. And so just when I was going through the Bible, a lot of the New Testament was written in Greek. And so just trying to kind of go and research what different scriptures would mean. And so, as I was doing that, came across a description of Joseph and Jesus being artisans or tektons. And so that kind of gave me an inspiration, I guess.
That's really cool. So tekton means in Greek, artisan or woodworker or?
Carpenter, artisan. Yeah.
That's awesome. Very cool. So I have a question about something you've said. So you said, my purpose is sharing the gospel and call making is an avenue to accomplish that. Can you tell me about a time where you got to live that out because of your call making?
I think anytime that someone comes to visit me in the shop, I'm kind of taking a spiritual temperature when they walk through the door. I've been able to, it's so funny, other believers will come, and when you meet another believer, there's just something there already, right? Because you're in the same family, essentially. I mean, we're all in God's family. And so I think the Spirit picks up on that. And so there's been times when I've been able to, pour into people. I also have an outfit in Canada. And so that's, a little time for a ministry as well. I've got, basically 4 hours at a time when I'm with my clients, and we can fellowship and I can take kind of their spiritual temperature, see where they're at with their walk, see what their beliefs are. Just kind of, some of my spiritual gifting is hospitality. So whether someone's coming to the shop or we're going out hunting, I want to invite them into experiencing that. And part of that is, an overflow.
When did you start guiding?
I went to Canada for the first time probably 7 years ago.
Okay.
And I worked with a fellow from Charleston here. I worked for him for 2 years, and then had another opportunity to kind of manage a camp up there. And I said yes to that. And then a friend of mine reached out, my business partner now, Jack, reached out to me, was like, hey man, why don't we start our own thing? And so after already committing to going to manage this one camp, we basically got a license and had to wait a full season until we could be able to, host our own groups and whatnot. So
that's cool.
Yeah, it's definitely special up there.
So you're are you up there for like a couple of weeks at a time, then come home and take a couple day break and back up there for the season, or how does that work?
No, we'll go up end of August, 1st of September, and we'll be there through pretty much the end of October.
Oh, really? That's cool.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so I'll come and go. My girls used to fly up and spend some time up there, and now it's kind of easier for me just to scoot down. I can kind of come check on things in the shop here, and then I can get back to the prairie.
That's cool. So another thing you said is your identity is a Christ follower, not a duck call maker. You said God stripped away pride that existed earlier in your life. What pride did God have to strip away to get you where you are now?
I've been kind of a people pleaser most of my life. And so it was kind of the idea of striving for some kind of perfection, I guess. For me, I mean, I could work 1 million hours and just immerse myself in this. And I think I've taken this passion and developed a way to work inside of it. But at the same time, I think God has taken that through some humility. I've learned this is not my business. This is God's business. And so really I'm just a steward for him. And so, when it comes to just the thought of in comparison, maybe with other folks, or like just kind of seeing where I'm at now, in a 2,000 square foot shop with CNC machines. And 10 years ago, it was a pole barn with, 2 outlets that I had to unplug one machine and plug the other one back into. And
yeah,
just always kind of staying humble and realizing like, this is not mine. This is all God's. And this is his talents that he's given to me. I just need to steward those.
Yeah. We're pretty aligned spiritually. I have the same view about my business is really God's. I'm the steward of it. I'm his manager. I've really struggled with applying that to the money that comes from the business too, because obviously like my view is that all money is God's. And again, we're stewards of that. We're his money managers. How has that been a challenge for you and your wife and your family running a business? The money you receive, just seeing that as God's. Have you struggled with that, or has it been pretty easy?
Early on, before I got into call making full time, so I went from being a golf professional, opening the golf shop, teaching lessons, to building houses, and all of a sudden income changed. And I had to go through some growing pains there, as far as like how to be a proper steward of God's money. And he stripped some things away from me during that process. I kind of, as the call business started to build up, I had already kind of got my butt handed to me on some of those things. And so through this whole process, like I said, just, it's hard to imagine that I'm sitting here in this shop now where 10 years ago there would have been cobwebs and spiders, in the screen probably, and just to see where, where he's, through obedience, where he's kind of blessed me in these areas.
Yeah, you mentioned some of those challenges. I mean, what were some of those challenges starting out and just kind of finding your way?
Yeah, so I think the big thing about our industry is there's a lot of money going out in the beginning of the year. So the season ends in January, and you've got to already be thinking about starting to talk to retailers, starting to sell your fall book of business. If you make turkey calls, you need to be, have already talked to those people in November and December and gotten purchase orders for those retailers. And so for me, just from a cash flow standpoint, learning how to manage that, learning when to invest in a machine, when to, maybe sit and talk to a bank or an investor, when to know, hey, I'm going to get my debt ratio to a certain area before I make my next investment, so that the business is protected, And I think a lot of that is, it wasn't always easy. I went from building houses to building pools with a buddy of mine. And then I was project managing for him, and I was working in the shop until 2-3 o'clock at night. And my priorities were wrong with my wife. My priorities were wrong with my spiritual walk. All I had was the focus was making sure this would be, viable or taking what I'm doing and kind of proving myself. And so it really wasn't until I gave up a lot of those things, until I gave up trying to control a lot of parts of the business, to where I turned them over to God. So for us in the beginning, I'm hand turning calls one at a time and selling them. And I'm going from making a post on Facebook to where a call's gone in 15 minutes to sometimes I'd hang on to a call for 3-4 months, and so picking up small jobs here and there, or kind of doing things just to make ends meet, until really it wasn't until the guy who was doing my production work, Dustin, called me and said, hey man, I got an opportunity for you. I'm kind of done with the CNC stuff. Why don't you buy this equipment and I can do production stuff and be able to make some more money that way, but then also have my brand on the side here and be able to have some cost savings by having my equipment. So that was a big turning point for us there.
So whenever you said your expectations had to kind of align with what God's calling you to do, you said you alluded to the fact that things got better. Did your alignment with what God wants you to do change how you viewed it and it was better, or did things actually start getting better from an objective perspective? Does that make sense?
Well, I think ultimately, I was trying to just be a bulldog and I'm going to work and make this thing happen. And it wasn't until I stepped back and said, oh man, why don't I, start my day in the Word? Why don't I try to do something with my wife? Why don't I get my priorities right? Why don't I take Sundays off? Let me go do something with my daughter. It wasn't kind of until some of those things, until I got more obedient with those things, that doors really just flew open. I'm doing some production work for probably the largest call maker in the country right now. And then I've got, obviously my own line of calls and stuff, but also just kind of filling in, other guys that were similar to me, 5 years ago, being able to do work for them. So, I think, I'd work 8 days a week if I could. That's just my mentality. Not that I always feel like I'm behind, but there's a certain point where you're throwing so much stuff at the wall to make a living, and then all of a sudden when it starts to stick, then you gotta get in and get the work done. So the only trouble with that is, I would say, until I was more intentional about a Sabbath, I would, if I'm trying to make 100 parts in a day, and I'm working 7 days a week, a lot of times things would happen and that wasn't getting done. And then all of a sudden I just kind of gave that up to God, not trying to control that. And I said, you know what, I'm gonna rest. It's kind of like the old story about the two lumberjacks. The one lumberjack takes the lunch and goes home and comes back and he cuts twice as much wood, where the other guy stayed there all day. I mean, it's kind of the same thing. It's like I'm resting in the Lord. The Lord is able to bless my path, I think, and bless kind of what I'm trying to work on. And I've definitely, seen that. I mean, same with us tithing, my wife and I tithing. Like, there's been seasons in our life when we didn't do that. It's not some kind of like tit for tat thing with God, but like when you realize what he's trying to show you through that, and then being able to like cheerfully give that, it's kind of the same thing. Like if I cheerfully give my time to my family and to the Lord on the Sabbath day, man, it's like floodgates open and I get so much work done in my normal, 6-day work week. It's just hard to explain, I think. Hopefully I'm doing a good job of articulating that, but yeah, it's been some really neat things that as my walk has gone through, down the funnel a little bit more, just being able to see God do and then have the discernment for some things that are in my business. So it's been amazing.
Those are two things that entrepreneurs really struggle with, is rest and money. So yeah, I mean, as an entrepreneur, like you said, when you put yourself out there, it's the scariest thing. And then you're grinding, trying to advertise, posting on Facebook. I do it all the time. I had 1-2 posts per week on Facebook. Hey, here are the projects I'm working on, here before and after photos in my line of work. And then work starts coming in, and then you're like, oh, wow, like people are responding to the stuff I'm doing. And I don't know if it's people pleasing or just maybe there's an idolizing money in there or something. But when you see it coming in, it's like, wow, I can literally work all day, every day, and I can make as much as I want. And that can be toxic. And
No,
I
I
think
agree.
if it's left unchecked, it will become toxic. And then with the giving thing too, we've seen God come through in huge ways with tithing and then giving. Just if we're giving, the minimum 10%, and if we're doing auto draft, like it just doesn't hit as hard. But if we're actively looking for ministries or for opportunities to give, or maybe like in my line of work, looking for a client that maybe is wheelchair bound and needs help, but doesn't really have the financial means to do it, it doesn't just posture my heart and make my work more enjoyable. I think things actually change. Like, I don't know, like I was asking you earlier, I don't know if it's just the perception of things or if things actually change. But once I let go, and I still struggle, like they still come up, like idolizing money and then just not being a good steward of what God's given me. I still struggle with those things, but I feel like as a whole, when I give those things over, everything else goes so much smoother, just like you're saying.
Yeah.
So you build products in an industry that is flooded. What do you do to make sure that Tekton Game Calls stands out in that industry?
Well, I think a lot of it has to do with authenticity. There's a lot of guys that are call marketers and not call makers. And there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with coming alongside a production company and developing a call and coming to the market with it. I think there's something to, when I was in golf business, used to call like digging it out of the dirt, right? So you go hit 1,000,000 balls and you find your swing and then you take it to the golf course. It's very similar. I think, the number of times that I've made a call, cut it on a flat jig or cut it on a jig that I'm trying to like find, just keep working on the next best thing I can do to get the next best call that I can make. There's just something there. And I think people see that. I know that social media is a great avenue for, selling products. Lord knows that's what got me through a couple of years there on Facebook and Instagram. But I think being able to bring somebody in and showing them the process and having a relationship with them and being able to see them a year later and talk about, hey, remember that time you came to Charleston and we turned a call and went here for lunch? And I think if you just do that enough and, it's just a genuine act of hospitality or fellowship, and to me, that's like my wheelhouse. And so being able to do that, I think that kind of sets me apart. I try to, when I was in the golf business, I always kind of go back to the golf business because I cut my teeth. I learned how to make a budget. I learned how to do customer service. I learned how to do an open to buy when retailers are looking to purchase goods. And so when I think about the parallels between the two businesses, it's very similar. And one of the ways that you can make yourself stand out in the golf business is the same thing, just being able to be recognizable, to being, as authentic a person as you can. When you see someone that you gave a lesson to a year ago, talk to them, see, how things been, when I was at Harbor Town, we'd have the same families come, year after year after year. And so, just being able to have a relationship with them and keep up with them. It's the same. It's so funny. The call world is so small, yet it's fairly big for the niche that it is, and there's a lot of those relationships that we build. I think I've heard it before said, like, your clients become your friends sometimes faster than your friends do, or something along those lines. But it's true, like a lot of my clients have turned into great friends, and it just comes out of, the relationship aspect of it. And so I think, as far as what I try to do daily, whether it's if I'm making 1,000 calls for another company, or if I'm making one call, hand turning it for somebody that came to Charleston to visit, like, I'm putting the same effort into it, trying to provide the same quality that's going out the door. And so I'm very content. At the end of the day, I'm still making duck calls. It doesn't matter if it's for me or for a company. And hopefully that shines through and people can see that.
Yeah. And I think too, these days, with everything being so automated, like you said, customer service, that's huge now. When you call somewhere to at least get, if it's not the owner, if it's at least the assistant or someone that can get in touch with the owner, or they'll get back with you instead of an answering machine. I just think customer service these days is so much more important than it used to be because of automation.
Right. Yeah. I mean, nothing will deter somebody faster than bad customer service. And they're going to tell like 10 other people how bad it was, And so when I think about you think about how Christ called us to be, it just all lines up, And so if I can be my true authentic self and be able to treat every transaction, not as a transaction, but as a relationship, I think it's big.
Yeah. All right. So if you lose your shop, your money, everything, all your tools tomorrow, and all you have is the knowledge from all the years that you've been doing duck calls, how would you start out tomorrow and do it all over again?
That's a great question. What kind of scale do you want to see? I guess that'll be my question. Yeah. Do I want to recreate where I've gotten myself in the last 10 years, but just fast track it by knowing everything I know? Or do I want to?
Yeah, so I guess you'd have to, well, it depends. Are you going to cash flow it, bootstrap it, or are you going to, take an immediate loan out and then scale quick? What would you do?
I think I would probably, not that it's the easy button, but having the knowledge, I would probably take that loan out. I'd find the way to I've heard it said, like, that's not necessarily that you're betting on yourself, but like, it's not really a bet. So for instance, if I go out and I sell a 1,000-part order with a call company, like, that gives me what I need to go to an investor or a banker and say, hey, here's a PO from XYZ call company. I need this, this, and this to be able to get started. I think that to me is like, the Staples easy button for sure. I mean, and again, going back to digging it out of the dirt, like, I feel like there's maybe a handful of guys in this country that are in the same talent realm as myself. Now, there's a bunch of guys that can do more artistic things and checkering and carving and stuff like that, which, you know, I can do minimal carving. I can checker calls. I've developed that skill. But like, as far as like being somebody that could take a block of wood or even just like a round and taking a chainsaw, breaking it down into a block of wood, and chucking it up and turning a call, to taking a call, designing it on a software program, going over to the lathe, programming the G code and popping it out, and having the knowledge how to finish it, how to make it sound good. From a non-boastful section, I would definitely say I think I would be in the top 10 of folks in this country that could do that. You know, there's some guys that have the machinery, but they've not really like developed their own sound, or they're more machinists. And then there's some guys that, you know, kind of more or less my speed. I'd say like Travis Ward with Makers. You know, him and Colton had Makers Call Company, and Travis and I are good buddies. You know, I know he could throw a piece of wood on a lathe and turn right around and be able to do it. One of my mentors, Brad Samples, you know, he lives about 2.5 hours from me. He's probably one of the guys that could kind of figure out how to do that design and that G code. And he does a lot of stuff with duplicators and things. And I think he would be very good on a production level if he had to. But, you know, like I said, there's other guys that they're more machinists. They, you know, maybe not the best callers. And so their experience comes from looking at the numbers and looking at other examples, or they, you know, they'll get a call and they'll reproduce it, you know, and which is awesome that they can do that. But I definitely feel like I've dug it out of the dirt for 10 years, 11 years, you know, trying to find my own sound, working on a flat jig, figuring out how to finish calls the best way I can. Every day is a learning experience. And even just like speeds and feeds with different material that I work with now, like trying to be as efficient as possible, you know, touching the call as little as possible when it's going through the manufacturing process. I mean, that's just little stuff that I'm working on now. But yeah, I mean, if I was going to do this again and scale, I would scale immediately, just because I know that I could go line up the cash flow, line up the machines, line up the business, and be off and running.
Isn't that interesting? I feel like that's what most entrepreneurs would do. And I don't know if it's because when we're starting, we don't have the knowledge or the experience, but it's also probably because, and I'd love to hear what it is for you, but why didn't we as entrepreneurs do that to start? For me, it was fear. Like, I don't want to put my family in a situation where I lose everything I've invested, because I'm not proven at this. I don't even know if I can do this. But what were those things, or what are those things for you that why you didn't do that initially?
I think a lot of it is knowledge. Knowledge as far as like God's put me in through different seasons to give me the knowledge to be where I'm at now. And like, I wouldn't give that up. I still hand turn things daily. I still am blowing calls daily. I evaluate, you know, what I'm doing daily. How can I be better daily? And I think for me, it's always been either throw enough at the wall until I can just figure out how to make it work. And then if I'm too overwhelmed, I'm either hitting my knees or, you know, just surrendering all of it. Or, you know, it's like the old John Wayne where he chucked that kid into the river and had to figure out how to swim, right? It's like, yeah, there's a little bit of that too, you know, and whether it's building calls or building a business, you know, I love it. I can't get enough of it, trying to figure out efficiencies, trying to figure out manufacturing, the customer service side of it, just growing a brand in itself. I recently diving into decoys a little bit. And so I think in the next year, you're going to see Tekton Field Co. come out, and that will be something that'll combine the experiences of hunting, the decoys, the duck calls, and the community here in Charleston. And I think that is going to be exciting for my wife and I and the folks here that are helping me in the shop. So
I'd love to hear more about that if you're open to it. That's really cool.
yeah. So, I mean, it really just stems from when I started out in waterfowling. Like, I made my own decoys partly because I was like, well, I don't have the money for that. And then by the time you spent, the money to buy the materials and figuring out the know-how, you might as well have just gone to Rogers and bought 4 dozen floaters. So part of me, always wanted to train my own dog and hunt my own dog. I've been able to do that. I wanted to build a sneak boat to be able to hunt out of. Been able to do that. Just spending time, 60 plus days in the field, you're going to find, hey, there's better ways to do things. And so I've got I've got decoy stuff. I've got blind stuff, both for the field and in the water, kind of building it up. And I think ultimately, when I chose the bird that is the logo, somewhere deep down, I saw a branding opportunity for that bird to be, on a shirt or on a pair of shorts or something like that, and be recognized. So I think it kind of all stems back to a bigger picture. I think the calls was how I dipped my toe in the water, and growing relationships in the industry has helped. And I'm really excited to hopefully bring some decoy stuff on board for next year and just keep growing. So through that wall right there is a 2,800 square foot space that I just dying to expand into when the time's right. I think I've got a license agreement set up with one guy that's got a decoy that he has a patent on, and I've been blessed to know some really talented decoy carvers. Luke Costello, he's got these 2 birds right there that he carved for me. I got, Philip Williams is a friend of mine. He's probably got more raw talent as far as carving goes in his pinky. He's a horse farrier, so he knows his way around with a rasp and a knife and stuff. And then Mike Marino is another good buddy of mine, and just would love to, maybe collaborate with them someday on some static decoys and kind of build this thing together. But yeah, I mean, it ultimately stems out of the want to, hey, if I'm going to hunt, I want to basically do everything but build my own shotgun.
Yeah.
I would love to load, some shotgun shells one day and just kind of understand that process. Migra Ammunition, their corporate office is 5 minutes down the road from me here. They come hunt with me in Canada every year, and been fortunate enough to forge a good relationship with them as another Charleston company. And so that's been kind of cool. And then, yeah, just trying to work on all those things that extend the season, right? Cause I mean, that's ultimately what they are,
Yeah. There's nothing like hunting over your own decoys or, shooting ducks out of your own sneak boat. I remember I've built a few decoys, and just carved them out of foam, and then burlap, and then tile adhesive over that, and they hardened up real good. And then, I built a sneak boat. Do you say you have built a sneak boat?
Mm-hmm, yeah. And I got some plans for another one that
cool
is a play off of a way to be able to trailer one and put a outboard motor on it. And, the New Jersey style sneak boats are kind of what I really liked, the idea of. Their tides are, well, maybe not their tides, but the way that their marshes are set up, they have more of like a long, gradual up the mud flat into where the grass starts. And here in Charleston, I mean, it's a pretty sharp drop off. And so just being able to figure out ways to combat that, it's probably been, I'd say 2 or 3 years since I've been in the fluff mud here in Charleston, but man, that's definitely where I cut my teeth. I'd love to fiddle with making boats in the future. I think the company's in Florida. I'm trying to remember the name of it, but they came out with a really lightweight sneak boat that you can tender on a bigger boat, and that thing is awesome.
Is it Water Feather? Or
I think that's it. Yep. Yeah. It starts with a W.
Yeah. They're like, I believe 55 or 60 pounds. They're so light.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
It's crazy. But, just being able to I think they make covers for them. You can brush them up. I mean, that's a no-brainer if you're hunting, get out of the pluff mud and get kind of dry and be, my style of hunting is not out of a big box blind in the marsh. It's just, I've been fortunate enough to fly with a friend, during duck season, and you just look down and you just, no wonder like birds aren't committing. You just got this big, giant, non-natural looking object out there.
Yeah.
So let alone if they're set up with the sun behind them and a big black spot out in front of them. I mean,
yep.
That's what those ducks are seeing. So
yeah,
I think, low profile and to be able to stay dry and warm and out of the mud, kind of get hidden. That's going to be the ticket around here.
That's great. Yeah, I agree. So the last question is, in 80 years, when you're gone and your daughter is telling people about who you are, who you were, what are the things that you hope that she says about you?
I hope that Ava tells. So my mom, she's actually in town. She was here helping paint calls today. She always had this saying that it was nice to be important, but more important to be nice. And so I hope that she would tell folks that not that I was nice, but that I cared for folks and was just completely in love with Jesus. I hope that's kind of what's conveyed. I think that she was baptized about a year ago, and man, that's probably been I told them, I always kid. I say to my wife, it's like, well, Ava's baptized. If she gets married and has kids, like that's probably the next big, or I guess graduate from high school, find, a suitable God-fearing man. And if they have kids, like what else could there be in life? Ramsey Russell called me today. He was driving to the Delta show and we were talking and there's been a 180 in his life. And we just said almost at the same time, like, man, if it just all goes away, it doesn't matter. We're winning. We've already started our eternity with Christ now, and so we're just lucky to play out our passions. But yeah, I mean, that's my biggest thing. I heard somebody say the other day, if you didn't have to worry about making any money, what would you do? And it's like, for the first time, I think in as far as I can remember, my first answer was tell people about Jesus. And whether that's like we were talking about, not having to feel like you're striving or pleasing people, or like there's some performance evaluation at the end of it, like we've already won, in him. So yeah, I mean, that's a great question. Hopefully Ava would tell folks that I love the Lord and, was proud of her and loved her mom.
Yeah. I think if any of those things are said about any of us, I think that's a win,
Yeah, for sure.
That's great. Well, Joey, thanks so much for joining me today, man. I really appreciate it.
You bet, brother.